Hi, and welcome to Lesson 4, Explaining Elizabeth's Problems. This lesson is going to focus on writing a 12-mark answer. You will need to be on this page in your lesson notes booklet, ready for Lesson 4. The first thing you're going to do is produce a mind map to show how the different problems that Elizabeth had linked together. So you need to use everything that you've done in the previous 3 lessons. Try and do it from memory first of all. Try and do it without looking back, and put down on the piece of paper some of the problems that Elizabeth had, and then see if you can start to draw some links between these different problems to show how her problems were interconnected. These problems didn't exist in isolation, they were linked together in many different ways. So if you pause this now and then spend some time creating your mind map from memory. Right, let's think about how you got on. Here is my little beginnings of a mind map. So I've put down religion, money and finances, gender, legitimacy, foreign affairs, and marriage as the main problems that Elizabeth had, and then I've tried to draw some links between them. So, for example, I've drawn a link between gender and marriage because obviously the fact that Elizabeth was a woman made her more vulnerable than if she'd been a man. She needed to find a husband, but that of course brings with it some difficulties, because whereas a man finding a wife, a queen is likely to be subservient to him, a queen finding a husband, who that means he would then become king, that provides a different dynamic based on gender. We can also see a link between gender and legitimacy, because the fact that Elizabeth was a woman and the circumstances in which she'd been born meant that there was a greater question of her legitimacy than there would have been possibly if she was a man. The issue of religion, you can see, is the thing which links to most of the other problems. So religion links to marriage, because if Elizabeth's going to find a partner, that brings with it some religious connotations, because she has to decide as a Protestant how she's going to find another powerful Protestant. She can't really marry a Catholic, that's not going to work. Religion links to foreign affairs quite clearly, because other powers in Europe were Catholic, and Elizabeth is ruling over a Protestant nation as a Protestant, and so therefore there's a potential difficulty there of how she's going to manage the power politics of Europe, and how she's going to keep England safe against other powers in Europe, many of whom were more powerful than England and were Catholic. And there's an issue to do with religion and legitimacy, because obviously the whole question of Elizabeth's legitimacy goes back to Henry VIII's decision to change religion in England because he wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon. And so religion is tied to these problems in many different ways. So you can see from my rather hastily drawn arrows there that there are interconnected natures of these problems, okay, that the different problems are connected together, and these are problems that Elizabeth would have to deal with, and the way she dealt with one problem would have consequences for some of the other problems that she also had to face. Okay, what we're going to move on to look at now is how we would answer a 12-mark question. Now, we know from the Germany module and we know from the medicine module that 12-mark questions start with the phrase explain why. And that will be the same in the 12-mark question in Elizabeth. It will say explain why. You can see here, and you've got this in your lesson notes pack, an answer that got 11 out of 12 to a 12-mark explain why question. It doesn't matter that we haven't covered this part of the Elizabeth module yet. It doesn't matter that the knowledge might very well be alien to you. I'm more interested in the style and the structure of the answer. So what I want you to do, and it explains this in your notes booklet also, I want you to read through this answer, and I want you to look at how good the answer is at expressing a clear argument, and also how the answer returns back to that argument and maintains focus and sustains that argument throughout the whole of the answer. That is the skill that we really want to work on, is how do we sustain a line of argument. Yeah, and yes, we need knowledge to support what we're going to say. That'll come later. You don't necessarily know anything about the knowledge in relation to this particular question, so I just want you to go through, highlight, underline, make a note next to all the areas where we can see that argument is very clearly stated and it's sustained throughout the answer, and that the focus is clear. So I'm going to pause. You need to pause this, go and have a look at the answer, and underline and annotate accordingly. Okay, so here's my version of this, so you can check your own and have a look and see how I've annotated it in terms of the focus and the argument. So the question is to explain why Raleigh's first colony in Virginia failed. So we're looking for reasons for failure. The opening is very clear. I believe that Raleigh's first colony in Virginia failed because of the lack of prior research and preparation that was made in advance of the attempt. Okay, so got a very clear argument. It's the lack of preparation. Start of the next paragraph. One reason for the failure was because of the time in which the ship set off. So that's linked to preparation. The time the ship set off was not the right time. We see at the end of that paragraph, we didn't have, therefore, because of the time it set off, the crops to plant then the colony wouldn't have failed because the group would have not had a shortage of food. So if they'd set off at the right time, then they would have been more successful. So that links very clearly to the question. It failed because of this, and it would have been more successful if things had been done in a different way. Another reason for the failed colony is because of the lack of skill diversity within the group that attempted the colonization. So that's another reason to do with research and preparation, advance planning ahead of the actual trip itself. So you can see there on that, in this particular slide, this part of the answer, very, very clear linking of the information back to the argument, which is that they didn't prepare properly, and also that argument is sustained by it being returned to. There's a focus, a clear focus. It's returned to at the start and end of each paragraph. And if we now move on to the second part of the answer, as a result of this, settlement became nearly impossible because no one within the group would work, leading to internal conflict. That's a lack of preparation, lack of planning that led to problems when they were there. Also, if a more safe and complete voyage had taken place and been planned out, then the ship may have been able to avoid the damage it received when travelling from England to America. And the original route was decided upon and ultimately meant that the ship received damage from storms, and they didn't plan properly. So what we have here, it's not a particularly sophisticated answer at all to get 11 out of 12, but it identifies a clear argument. There was a lack of preparation before the voyage and a lack of research about how best to have a successful colony. And then at the start of each paragraph, it clearly explains a reason which is linked to this idea of lack of research or lack of preparation, and it supports that reason with some knowledge. Okay? In the sense that all of the reasons being talked about are to do with lack of preparation and lack of research, that means that the answer is clearly nicely linked together, because each paragraph is linked to that overall argument of there was a lack of research, there was a lack of preparation, there was a lack of planning. So what we see here is a very clear answer, very focused answer, with an argument which is running throughout the whole answer, and knowledge that is used to support that argument and to support that that driving of an argument from the beginning to the end of the answer. And that's the crucial skill to learn for a 12-mark answer, to explain why by sustaining an argument throughout the whole of your answer. So, you know what's coming next. it's your time to have a go at answering a 12-mark question. So you've seen there in the modelling that we've just done what an answer should look like in terms of how it should be structured, the importance of having a clear argument which then runs throughout your whole answer. The question that you are going to write an answer to is to explain why Elizabeth faced so many problems when she came to power in 1558. So all of the previous work that we've done in this module has all been about the problems that Elizabeth faced when she came to power in 1558. So you have an absolute wealth of information about this which you could use to answer the question. Importantly, you need to have a very clear argument. So is there one of those problems, or there are a couple of those problems that are particularly important, and do they link to some of the other problems? You will be able to sustain your argument effectively if you have a clear sense of which problem or problems were most important and how they help to cause some of the other problems. So if you were going to argue, for example, that her legitimacy was the most important problem faced, you could explain that, and you maybe explain how that links to some of the other problems. If you were going to say that the issue of religion was the most important problem, and then you might explain how that links to some of the other problems also. Okay, so the important thing is you have a clear argument. You then have 3 or 4 paragraphs afterwards that explain the problems, but at both the start and end of those paragraphs you are clearly explaining your argument, and you are driving that argument throughout your answer. So you are explaining why one reason or the reasons might be more important than others, and you're showing how those different the problems that she had, different reasons for facing difficulties in 1558, how they are linked together. Okay, so have a go at writing that answer, do it in the booklet, and then send the booklet to your class teacher. Or you could do it as a separate document, send it to your class teacher, get it marked, and you could paste it back into the booklet, however you want to do it. But you need to write that answer and then submit it to your teacher for them to mark and have a look at it and give you some feedback. Okay, so that's the end of today's lesson. There's slightly less to do in today's lesson, in between the little tasks in between the video, because you're actually now going to get on and write the answer. Good luck, give it your best shot, and we'll see you again soon for lesson 5.